My left knee went beyond my right knee, like completely snapped in half. And the surgeon basically said, like, you'll never play without pain or restriction in your knee again. I was just using this religiously, and that was the first time in over 2.5 years I had woken up without any pain or restriction in my knee. We created all of our own processes. We went from producing 0 shots a week to 15,000 shots a week. We're up against the big boys who have billions of pounds worth of budget. But for us as a business, like, we're winning shelf space. That shelf space doesn't appear from thin air.
Hi, welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Lean with Totally Management Centre in collaboration with Lean Made Simple and Ryan Tierney. Really excited to share this lean journey with you. So today we've got Thomas Robson Kanu, former professional international footballer, now SME company owner, and we're going to talk about the story of Thomas's football career and how that's transitioned into the business that he owns today. Thomas, welcome. Really glad you could join us. So first things first, we're going to come to the lean side of things in a minute. You started off your career as a professional footballer. Would you like to give the audience a little bit of insight behind the curtain of that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thank you very much for having me here. Super excited to share my story and obviously talk all things lean, which we will definitely get to. But my story, you know, some people may know me as Paul Robson Kanu, former Premier League international footballer. Had the privilege of playing, you know, for West Bromwich Albion, Reading Football Club, both in the Premier League and also Wales internationally. My grandmother is Welsh. But my journey as a young professional footballer was basically like faced with constant adversity. Right. I joined Arsenal as a 10-year-old, one of the sort of top talents in the UK. Was with them for 5 years to 15. And the academy manager at Arsenal was Liam Brady, so former Arsenal great. He basically sat me down as a 15-year-old and said, look, we don't think physically you're going to be big enough or strong enough to play in the first team or at the level you're aspiring to, so we're going to release you. So as 15 years old, I was released from Arsenal. I remember driving back in the car with my dad, you know, tears in my eyes, boyhood club, and the fear of not making or achieving my dream, which was to become a Premier League footballer. Fortunately, the academy manager of Reading Football Club was Brendan Rodgers, so former Liverpool and current Celtic manager. And he had scouted me and seen me playing in games. And the next day we got a call from Brendan himself. And he said, look, we're building something special at Reading. We want to promote the academy and we want players to break into the first team. And we believe that you can do that. So went to meet with Brendan, went to the Medeski Stadium in Reading. A day later, I had signed a 2.5-year deal with them as a scholarship to allow me to basically stay with them until I was 17 years of age, where eventually you then become a professional. And so joined Reading Football Club as a 15-year-old, and Reading were amazing. They were fast tracking me in the academy, and I was playing with the under-18s and then obviously with the reserves. So as a 15-year-old, I was playing in reserve team football against effectively grown men. Yeah. And they wanted to fast track me into the first team and make me one of the youngest ever players for Reading. And playing in a reserve team against Milton Keynes, performing really well. And the centre-half decided to teach me a lesson. So he basically came in with a knee-high challenge. And that knee-high challenge ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament, my posterior cruciate ligament, medial ligament, and damaged pretty much all of the cartilage in my knee. To put things in perspective, my left knee went beyond my right knee, like completely snapped in half. So long story short is, from that point in time, I was fast-tracked to the hospital. They did an MRI scan, arthroscopy, and broke the news to me that I would need an ACL reconstruction. And the surgeon basically said, like, you'll never play without pain or restriction in your knee again. So you're just going to have to live with it. Went through the surgery. A year later, began recovering and training again. Managed to feature in my first game back. In the first game back, I did exactly the same injury. So ruptured my anterior cruciate ligament, same knee, and went to the same surgeon. And the look on the surgeon's face was, you're really never going to make it, because the restriction and pain that you'll have in your knee, you're going to have to live with. And he basically said, like, do you want to go through with the surgery? I was determined to go through the surgery, so went through it. 12 months later of rehabilitation, began trying to play and train again. And I was hampered with constant inflammation and swelling in my knee. I couldn't get around the pitch. I struggled to get out of bed in the mornings. And so that was like the journey, the early stage journey of my professional football career. which again, like not a lot of people will know because they will have just seen me playing in the Premier League, experiencing, you know, what I experienced. So yeah, full of adversity.
I know you had lots of really good times in your career, but one of your highlights is the goal you scored 2016, Puskas nominated goal of the season. So Puskas scored as basically best goal in the world for that year.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about how that felt from somebody who don't really know about football. How does that feel to score a goal like that?
Yeah, so, you know, I was fortunate to have like amazing moments in my career. And once I finished playing football to ultimately focus on, you know, the Turmeric Co and running the business, like looking back, I realized that actually any sporting career is simply made up of like moments. Mm-hmm. And not all athletes have moments in their career. And, you know, the moment for me in my career was that goal in the, you know, quarterfinals of the Euros, where, you know, scored against Belgium. You know, it was deemed a wonder goal.
They were one of the best teams in the world at the time, Belgium.
Yeah, one of the best teams in the world. They were ranked #1 in the world. Their starting lineup, I think, was worth £750 million. Oh. And yeah, as Wales as a nation, you know, minnow nation, we were able to knock them out of the quarterfinals and get through to the semis. So yeah, it was a special moment. But again, like all of those moments would never have happened, you know, if the small details, you know, the decisions that we made early on in my career, that ability to, you know, be disciplined, develop resilience in my mindset, like I would never have achieved it. So yeah, just super grateful.
Yeah. So I guess the next step's professional footballer, now owner and CEO of Turmeric Company. How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's all tied into my own journey, really. So as a 17-year-old, having gone through those 2.5 years of recovery and trauma and surgeries, you know, back to back, I began trying to play and train again, but I was constantly hampered with restriction in my knee, so I physically couldn't move. And so I spoke to the physios and doctors at the club, and they said, look, like the surgeon told you this was going to be the case. Like you now have chronic tendinopathy in your patella tendon alongside all of the trauma your entire knee has gone through. You're basically going to have to live with it. But what they then said was that we can prescribe you standard medication, you know, anti-inflammatories, painkillers, to reduce the edge of the pain you're experiencing. So I began taking this sort of standard medication, you know, which is relatively available off shelf. But within 2 weeks, my body had a complete adverse reaction to it. So I started passing blood in my urine, severe nausea, couldn't sleep. So I had to stop taking this medication, which was taking the edge off the pain, but I was still constantly restricted in terms of movement and ability to play. And so it was at that point in time that my father and I basically began looking at natural ways to reduce pain, inflammation and swelling. And we went on essentially a research binge. We began looking at various cultures around the world, different practices. So ancient Asian cultures, Ayurvedic practices, where they use natural ingredients to anecdotally reduce pain, inflammation and swelling. So essentially my father sourced all of these ingredients and began turning them into this blend. And they often say like true innovation is born from necessity, and I was in need. Like this was my final chance to try and recover from the surgeries that I'd had. And it was my only option, but I consumed it religiously. My father would make batches every 3 or 4 days, leave them in my fridge. Certainly wasn't a lean process at that time. And I realized that that was the first time in over 2.5 years I had woken up without any pain or restriction in my knee. And so from that point in time, I was able to begin to play again. I was able to begin to train properly. And a year after that, I made my first team debut for Reading. A year after that, I made my international debut for Wales. And a year after that, I made my Premier League debut when we got promoted to the Premier League with Reading. And I was able to do all of that pain-free. And it was only a decade later that we realized there was this growing trend in functional wellness, functional beverages, functional foods. And so we realized that we had this unique blend at home and we needed to bring it to market. And then that was the journey of basically beginning to launch the Turmeric Co.
Yeah, and that you turned what was something that changed your outlook in your life and your pain into a business.
Yeah, precisely, exactly. And it was never a project to, you know, we never planned on turning it into a business. But what we realized was that we were so passionate about this blend. Like by this time, everyone in our family was using it to reduce chronic inflammation. You know, if they were experiencing pain, they would ask my dad to make these blends. And but we realized actually as a population, there was a massive opportunity to contribute towards health. So actually, if we could offer this in a convenient format to people in all different walks of life, then we knew it would make a difference to people's lives and well-being.
Fast forward until now, the business has actually grown to be really successful and really big.
Yeah, so we launched in 2018, and within 4 weeks of launching, we received our first life-changing customer testimonial. And so since launch, we've serviced over 300,000 customers now in the UK, have received over 15,000 life-changing customer testimonials, and our distribution is beginning to really accelerate. So we're stocked in the likes of Sainsbury's, we've got really strong D2C, customer base, and our aim is to ultimately make picking up a turmeric co shot as easily accessible as picking up a Coke or picking up a water. And so, that's our vision and that's our passion. And ultimately, in order to do that, we actually had to become a beverage manufacturer before we launched the brand. And the reason why we had to do that was because the processes that were currently or previously a kitchen process simply couldn't be replicated in the existing beverage manufacturing space, because they typically just process liquids. They don't process raw ingredients. But what that means is that liquid has been heavily processed, typically pasteurized, and is ambient. And when it goes through those types of processes, you strip the nutritional value out of these juices. So we essentially figured it out very quickly. And so we had to build a bespoke manufacturing site. We went from producing 0 shots a week to 15,000 shots a week in a couple of years, but we hit capacity, and we had to go through a big step change to increase our manufacturing capability, our knowledge around manufacturing. And then ultimately, as we began to scale, we began to be like, why does that issue keep happening? On one of the lines, like the head's always falling off, the last 15 minutes of the run is always messy, there's no clean fill. And so that was then our journey into lean and beginning to understand, like, how can we drive continuous improvements into the business? And me personally, I've always been sort of an avid reader and avid learner. And so I was picking up on, all of these various different methodologies and, approaches to ultimately driving waste out of a business or out of a process and driving efficiency, which allows you to then scale.
So we kind of hooked up on LinkedIn probably over a year now ago, and Thomas and a couple of your supervisors came to visit us, and I mentioned your book, and in fact it was David I gave the book to, because then David came to do a 2-day course, and I gave David your book to go and read, and then Thomas kindly invited myself and my boss Julian up to the turmeric company up in Cambridgeshire. Would you like to share just a couple of things that you've implemented early doors from just by reading Ryan's book, really?
Yeah, definitely. Lean is what we realized is that there are so many different approaches to lean, and the books, and even the original Toyota books around lean and core principles, it's so overwhelming, and it's like, how do you start? And so for us, we went on a journey where we had a couple of, I think I mentioned to you, there was a few consultants who came in and gave us a day's workshop. And really great in terms of understanding, the language around it, trying to understand top level the principles, but there was no connection between that and the application to your business or to your process. Because ultimately, whatever business you're running, it's unique to what you're doing, right? And so there was no blueprint for us of what we were originally doing, because we created all of our own processes, whether it's our manufacturing, our extraction. So that was all built in-house. But then to layer that on top of actually how do you drive efficiency into that, there was a massive disconnect. And so, that was when, obviously reached out and connected with Paul, knew what, Toyota stands for and, the wealth of knowledge within Toyota as an organization. But then coming across, Lean Made Simple for us was the first step of beginning to try and create a bridge between knowledge and applied knowledge. And so, we've cascaded your book across the entire business, lots of orders on Amazon, which I'm sure you've sort of hopefully seen. But some of the fundamentals in there really break it down to ultimately begin to apply it. So, the best example and the best piece of traction that we've got is those morning meetings, and that's literally and I think after our team came up to see you, obviously Paul connected in terms of the book and Lean Made Simple as a principle. So kindly gave your book to our team. we began implementing those morning meetings immediately. And, that was probably 2.5 months ago. It's obviously evolved from there. But the biggest impact that we've seen of implementing that is fundamentally like the culture shift and the engagement that we've got from our team now in the business. And before it was like, we'd go down and we'd be like, oh, okay, we need to begin to implement 5S's here. Like, how we're looking at all of the various different spaces. But it's like, that doesn't mean anything to, the majority of the operators or the lead supervisors or the lead operators. So beginning those morning meetings, it has been like the most simple but the most significant step change for us in beginning to incorporate lean and continuous improvements as a philosophy and culture into the business.
So you've been part of a high performing team from like the age of 10 and 10, 15. I'm really interested to know how those same principles, from playing professional football translate into like building a business or even into lean, because there's a lot of similarities. It's continuous improvement in your sport, which probably translates, I would say, into business.
Yeah, definitely. So firstly, it's pretty much every boy and girl's dream now to become a professional footballer, right? So some of the statistics, it's harder to become a professional footballer than it is to get into Oxford or Cambridge, right? It is so competitive. And actually, when I look back from 10 years of age to 19 years of age, only a handful of all of the players who I played with during that period actually had professional football careers, right? And I would have played with thousands of players with my teams or against in the opposition. And so that mapped along in terms of performing in a elite and high pressure environment, combined with, my personal experiences of adversity, have basically formed and created my mindset and my approach. And so, the only things that you can guarantee, that you are going to face is, change, and that's in life, in business. So how can you handle change, and actually how can you be on the front foot of change? And then it's adversity, right? So again, a big thing is around improvements, but really you're only identifying improvements if you're identifying issues, right? And so issues are adversity, right? This filler head's broken, the floor's damaged, okay, this door isn't working, we're not hitting our capacity or our target. Like, it's all around, identifying like where are the bottlenecks, where are the issues. So that approach, like living and breathing like that high performance mindset where you accept adversity and you accept change, is like the model of my approach to work. And so then bringing that into business in a very competitive, every industry is competitive, but food and beverage industry, like, we're up against the big boys who have billions of pounds worth of budget, can invest in marketing, have already achieved economies of scale, have the distribution. But for us as a business, like, we're winning shelf space. That shelf space doesn't appear from thin air. We're in a place now where it is David versus Goliath, and you have to be willing to face into that adversity and be willing to face the challenges. And it's not easy. Like, I've had sleepless nights, I've had challenges which genuinely I could not see a solution to, but being willing to constantly resolve, constantly look at it, constantly address it like that, and have that mindset of positivity in the face of adversity is really like how we've created what we've created so far. But again, like, that evolution of us as a business now is around like continuous improvements, like cutting out waste, like how can we scale but scale efficiency, ultimately drive more productivity into our workforce. So actually our workforce can do more with less, and it's like that mentality and that approach is so aligned with lean. It's like, and so, but again, to my point before, is like, but actually how do you begin to bring it into a business and make it unique to your process and also to your vision? And so, yeah, I think that's why we've just, we've built the relationships that we have, and we're so engaged in this as a philosophy, yeah.
Would it be fair to say, and at that point in time when it happened, when you had your issue with your knee at a very young age, would it be fair to say if that hadn't have happened, you wouldn't be so successful as a businessman now? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. Well, firstly, we wouldn't have the turmeric as a range because my father would never have had to have created it. And again, like, I look at other brands and products on the shelf, like there's no real purpose to what they're delivering. You know, the majority of the ingredients are apple juices, you know, waters, orange juices, you know, cheap alternatives to a truly functional beverage. And so, you know, our mission is to ultimately deliver beverages which heal people, you know, which allow people to lead a normal life, a healthy life, live to their maximum. And so, yeah, like I probably wouldn't have the passion that I have now in the business if I hadn't have gone through the adversity specific to me, you know, and ultimately come through it. And so, yeah, like I'm very grateful for the experiences that I've had. And again, like a lot of the time, like whatever mission or journey you're on, like it's your experiences which shape you, but it's actually how you respond and how you react to your experiences which ultimately dictate the direction and the outcome of those. Yeah.
This is not so much a lean question, but I'm just curious and interested to see how beneficial was building your personal brand. How did that benefit the business brand? And have you used your personal brand to influence the business brand?
Yeah, no. So I think like when you're looking at like the consumer space or any product space, it's very hard to share like a true like personalized mission. And so my personal journey and story, which we've spoken about, is so aligned with what we do now as a business that actually me being able to talk about my own journey and why we're doing what we're doing only amplifies what we're doing from the business side. And again, like, you know, I sit in various different forums, you know, I'll give various different talks, and a lot of entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs will always ask, you know, well, what's your advice when getting into a business, starting up a business? And my answer to that is like, make sure you're genuinely passionate about the service or product that you're delivering. You know, and a big thing is like, it's so easy to follow a trend, you know, jump on a fad, you know, because it's cool, or because, yeah, actually, I think this is, you know, it's got a great margin, let's just, you know, do it. But ultimately, at some point, when you then hit that adversity, you're not going to be willing to push through that to ultimately come out the other side. And so, yeah, like that ability to share my own passion, and I haven't been able to do it as much as I would like because I've been so focused on the operational side of building the infrastructure to deliver a successful business. But I'm definitely passionate and keen to begin to do more of, you know, that personal brand building and sharing why I'm doing what I'm doing, you know, because I've had a career in professional football, you know, I played in the Premier League, you know, I've done all of that, but actually what I'm doing now, there is so much more purpose and actually so much more value to what we're creating than what I've done before.
The real successful lean organizations are very purposeful organizations. So like our company, Seek Matters, we make chairs for people with disabilities. So there's a real strong why. We know why we're doing lean. Lean is our vehicle to, you know, get us to our vision.
We're very much at the start of the journey. You know, we're certainly not nowhere near this yet, but our ambition is to get there. But like, I would also say as well, like what I've found in lean, and obviously with Toyota as well, is like it all processes, systems, you know, like all of the terminology, like it's actually the people. You know, and what I've found is like the people who are true believers and advocates and implementers of lean are genuinely like great people, you know, and they really care. And it leads back to your point around the passion and caring. And so, yeah, like I think being able to draw that into the business and, you know, draw that from the business, I think there's a real strong synergy. And I'm very grateful that we've come across lean. We've, you know, been introduced and have a connection now with Toyota, and you know, hopefully as we scale, we can raise everyone around us as well. You know, rising tides rises all ships. You know, so that's our vision as well.
Well, Thomas, it's been really super cool listening to your story. Thanks very much for giving us your personal insight into your journey. I think you're only going to go on to bigger and better things. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you continue to go. So best of luck for the future. Thanks very much again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.